Hello, stroke survivors and their families everywhere. Welcome back to Stroke Warrior Radio, where recovery finds its voice. Today, we're joined by Chad Queen. I said that right. Chad Queen, yes. Originally from Kentucky, who's celebrating what, your 2 years anniversary this month?
Today is actually the 2 year anniversary. Yes, sir.
God bless. Chad's stroke affected his basal ganglia area of his brain, impacting emotion, coordination, and balance. He credits his faith, family, and a positive no quit attitude for helping him move forward. Today, we're going to talk about the realities of recovery, family, faith, and the question that will change uh, everyone that he asks everyone. What if you don't wake up tomorrow? How should or will Chad, uh, how should, how should or will that change the way you live today? Chad, welcome to Stroke Warrior Radio.
Thank you, Ralph. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate what you do to reach so many people that unfortunately are affected by a stroke now. It's just becoming, I don't know if epidemic's the right word, but it definitely is life changing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about yourself before you and your life before stroke.
So before the stroke, I enjoyed being outdoors. You could find me on a golf course very regularly. I love the game of golf. I love being outdoors, walking my dogs and whatnot. We moved out here about 5 years ago. It's at Elizabethtown, Kentucky, about 45 minutes south of Louisville, onto what I call our country retreat. Yes, it's only about 1 acre with a creek in the back of the dead end country lane, but just like the old show Green Acres, I kind of like to think of ourselves as Queen's Acre. I don't know if that's right or not, but try to do what we can. I started a garden here, enjoy time with my dogs. I got a nice fire pit.
Very
And little
nice.
did I know that about a month after my 50th birthday, a lot of people have midlife crises. I had one that I didn't ask for,
Yeah.
but that's when my stroke happened, August 21st, 2 years ago today. And
Oh my gosh.
yep, I had after my stroke, I questioned God with that question you mentioned that I ask people is what happens if you don't wake up tomorrow? How should or how will that change the way you live today? But besides my faith, laughter got me through it. And I was asking people when I had my stroke happen about a month after my 50th birthday, I asked my dear sweet aunt, among other people, I said, hey, I need your help. I'd like to find out who gave me my stroke for a birthday gift, and I would like to return it. Shout out to my Aunt Debbie who says, well, honey, I'm so sorry I didn't keep the receipt. She didn't miss a beat.
I love it. Uh, did you know you were having a stroke?
Um, I knew something was off. My wife and I were watching TV on that morning we usually do before we go to work. I was en route about 15 minutes away from getting on the road, and I was a contractor at Fort Knox here in the area. And my wife could tell I was trying to talk to her, but she couldn't understand me. So she could tell my speech was slurred. She was looking at me, and then she asked me to try to stand up or sit up, and I couldn't put weight on my left side. So it became more serious. I don't know how other people's strokes come on, but it's one of those situations where I don't know if out of body experience is the right word because I never went out of body, but I
Right.
kind of feel like, wait a minute, I know what I should be saying or how normal things should be, but at the same time, I could just tell something was off. And at one point, my wife Kim looks at me and says, should we call an ambulance? And at that point, of course, as I've learned now, the saying is time saved, brain saved. Thankfully, we didn't waste any time. We called the ambulance and they were at my house within 20 or 30 minutes.
Awesome. So you were able to get that TPA drug?
I was, but what kind of ticked me off, not about the TPA drug or the situation, while I was had slurred speech and couldn't sit up, when my wife first became concerned about me, by the time the ambulance got here, my speech had cleared up and I was able to stand up and take myself to the bathroom before the ambulance took me away. So I guess I had a TIA at first, is what it sounds like, or what I think happened, because as the ambulance took me away, and the hospital here in my area was about a 10 or 15-minute ride, about halfway through the ride, I went full bore stroke because my speech became slurred and my balance was off and everything else. So I went from having some issues to not having issues, or I felt like I didn't. Hi, Maisie. I know you want to talk to then I went full bore stroke. So it's kind of like I asked God later, I said, God, if you needed to get my attention, I would have settled for a stub toe. But again, as they
Yeah,
say,
exactly.
God's ways aren't our ways.
When did they tell you it affected the basal ganglia?
So I guess I first heard that when I had an MRI the day I was at the hospital, because I was um, admitted to the ER. And along that day, I had tests and whatnot. And that was kind of foreign to me because I'd kind of known what a stroke does, but I didn't know the different ways that it affected the different parts of the brain and what that meant. And actually, I'm kind of thankful I didn't really know, because after I had spent 5 or 6 days in the hospital and then about 2.5 weeks in a local rehab facility, when I met with my neurologist the first time, he said to me, "This is the worst kind of stroke you could have. That's just because it attacks such a part of your brain and it's hard to come back from." And I think I'd been told that in maybe a different way. It's okay, Maisie. But for the 6 days I was in the hospital and 2.5 weeks in rehab, it might have been tougher for me to attack my stroke, so to speak, in recovery, if I'd known I had kind of been given the like a heart attack is considered a widowmaker. No, I never flatlined, but I kind of was on death's door. But then when it finally hit me how serious my stroke was, it was a situation where, yeah, it affected the emotional parts of my brain for sure.
Yeah, it's
Like I remember my great uncle who called me and talked to me with his wife, my great aunt, and he was talking about me being a great family man. And I could be an emotional guy anyway before the stroke, but I started to sob just because here this person's telling me how great a family man I am. And I felt, I don't know if a failure is the right word, but I just felt less than a man, because a stroke takes away a lot of your manhood, or it can.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many different strokes are so similar, but they're so different. There's so many different ways it can affect each one of us. That's why we do what we do. Um, so I guess one of the questions I'm always interested in is when did it really sink in and that recovery was going to change your life?
Well, it's kind of funny how perspectives change. I was scheduled to play in the golf scramble with my dad 2 weeks after my stroke. And even though I couldn't sit up in the hospital bed without hitting the button to raise the hospital headboard and all that, I was convinced, oh, no problem. I had a stroke. Even though I can't sit up or I need to use a wheelchair to get around, I'll be able to play in 2 weeks, no problem. So I think what really hit me was, what really hit me and affected me probably when I was in rehab, because the way the rehab was, I was doing 2 or 3 hours of therapy a day, whether it be occupational therapy, physical therapy. I didn't need speech therapy as much, but I had to work on swallow therapy and those kind of things. And I think those days when I was a total of almost 3 weeks away from home and away from my dogs. I realized how serious it was.
Yeah.
And as far as knowing what kind of recovery I faced, I'm not a quitter. I've always told people that I'm a fighter. And while this opportunity, even in the rehab facility, I started to change the way I looked at things, not just being a fighter and not a quitter, but also a positive attitude. I just kind of started to come to grips with the fact that God gave me this opportunity, not the way I would have taken it on as a stroke survivor, but I just tried to encourage and motivate others. And I even did things like got to know the hospital staff that were around me. I tried to encourage them and pray for them. Like some people were surprised. Like I used to have trouble remembering names. It's more like
Right.
I was better with faces than names, but for some reason, the stroke really supercharged my name memory. And I would do things like there was Dalton was one of my night nurses at the hospital. I always tried to lean into, and I hope I didn't drive him crazy. I kind of told him, just call me Mr. Handful because I'm a lot, and I already knew that before the stroke.
Tell our listeners, and I'm sure we've all heard some of this, but for new survivors, it's important to know um, because we're not told a lot of things. Uh, they're the doctors and the nurses keep us alive, and that they consider their job done. So we're not told as much as I think we should be. What were some of the hardest physical and emotional challenges you had?
For me, I think I'm a communicator by trade. I've been in communications and public relations for about 30 years. My speech was knocked out a little, and it was slurred when I was tired or because of the stroke. My left side was hard to deal with, and my left side was weak, and they always had to make sure that I wasn't going to choke when I was eating things. But one of the hardest things was I know what my voice sounded like before the stroke. And after the stroke, it took a while till it kind of got in groove. Like for a while, I felt like I was one of those old English dubbed Godzilla Japanese movies where the mouth wasn't quite matching what my voice was saying.
Yeah,
So that was one of the physical challenges. And the other one I think was I've always been active. I've always enjoyed walking without assistance and trying to challenge myself. Growing up, I ran cross country and played tennis, and sports
yeah,
and outdoors has always been fun for me. But knowing that the journey I was on, where, like I said, when I was in the hospital, I could barely sit up. And I remember one of the physical therapists at the hospital challenged me to sit in a recliner out of my bed. I think he wanted me in those 6 days to get to starting off with like 15 minutes out of the bed sitting up, then 30 minutes. And again, this would have been a piece of cake before my stroke, but it's things that you take for granted that you don't really realize what happens when you're knocked out like that. And
yeah,
then mentally, I've always been a positive person, but I would say mentally taking things one day at a time. Like I said, today is my 2 year anniversary, but at the same time, I look back to 2 years ago and where I was. It's hard to really put myself in that mindset, but it's
yeah,
like an analogy I heard recently. When we're healthy, pre-stroke, you might be at the bottom of a staircase. And if you're looking into the landing halfway up the staircase, you don't think about the steps in between to get to the landing. You just do it when you're pre-stroke. But it's so much more involved, so much more exhausting. Just to even take things one step at a time after a stroke in that
yeah.
staircase analogy.
How you I admire this about your story is the positiveness. How's how would you what would you like to tell our listeners about how staying positive without pretending the difficult days aren't difficult?
Well, the difficult days are definitely there. But what I want to tell everybody out there, this goes for caregivers too, because that's another thing we can talk about. This takes a
Amen.
different toll on caregivers. I mean, the physical part hits us as stroke survivors. It's more mental and emotionally taxing for the caregivers. But what I would tell people who have a stroke, it's like there's going to be good and there's going to be bad days. You just have to embrace the good and know that the bad days won't go on forever. And it's a situation where, like, there's a friend of mine who has a family member who had a stroke, and she just doesn't want to get out of bed. So, for me, and what I would tell the stroke survivors is just like that staircase analogy I used, take things one step at a time. Sometimes it's just a matter of putting one foot in front of the other instead of trying to go from the landing to the next step. Just work on getting balanced, building your core, and maybe you just work on putting a step up, putting one foot on the next stair, and then work on putting the left foot, the other foot on the stair. Because don't try to do everything at once. It's like that saying they say, and I never know why somebody ever thought, "Hey, how do you eat an elephant?" I never know who thought that's a good delicacy, but they say you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So just don't get overwhelmed. I'm still not quite back on the golf course, but I'm getting closer, and I'm 2 years later. So just takes
Nice.
time. Be patient with your recovery, and just what I would challenge you, like I'm on my deck right now, getting to enjoy nature. Don't just sit inside your house and get locked in your house watching TV. I do that. I just don't do it all day, or try not to do it all day. Or don't get locked on your screen. Try to grow your intellect. Like I used to love to read a book. I love the feeling of paper. It's being a former journalist. I like reading newspapers and books and stuff. But what I've had to do is I rely on technology like a Kindle to read books. So instead of turning pages, I just hit the next button.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, it's funny how um I think because of our strokes or and the recovery we have to go through, we start paying attention to those little things, like the feeling of the paper, like maybe I can't turn the pages, so I do the Kindle. It's I just I'm appreciative in my recovery anyway. The things I learned to do that I took for granted, like you said, you take it for granted, but all of a sudden it's like, wow, I can do this way, and it works great. That kind of always inspired me.
Well, and one thing I'd like to add in doing things different, like I said, my grandparents were farmers. I had a hillside farm before my stroke. Last year, the first year after my stroke, I couldn't do the hillside farm. I still can't do the hillside farm. But what I did, I got some potted porch plants last year to at least I could be able to take care of them on our extended deck. And then this year, I increased that ability with my wife's big assistance. I got some raised flower bed carts, and we're growing just down the way eggplant, green pepper, basil, and tomatoes. So I'm not quite back to where I wanted to be, and I had to realize that getting a big garden is going to take time, and I'm going to do it differently. Like you just have to learn to adapt, and if things don't turn out the way you want them to, that's okay. Just try. You might need to do them differently, or just it's like they say, you tell God your plans, and He laughs. So
Yeah,
I'm not saying that God enjoys our problems or our dilemmas. But in my life, he's been the reason that I've been able to continue and have a positive life because there's the Bible verse that says, not if you have problems, but when. And that's a verse that means a lot to me.
yeah. I I'm hearing your story about the eggplant and tomatoes and everything. I'm thinking to myself, what an incredible visual um, measure of success that you've done for yourself. I mean, you start out with a couple potted plants. Now you go in this garden out there. I mean, that's just uh, awe-inspiring, I guess, because it's measurable. You can see what you're doing, and that's a lot of stroke survivors don't get to see that. So I really
Well, the
appreciate that.
one thing I would tell people too is it's so easy to give up, and not just getting outside for me, because another story, a God moment in my recovery was the covered porch I'm on. We didn't have an extended deck. We live on a walkout basement ranch, and my mother has some health issues. So before my stroke, I hired a friend of mine to build an extended deck that wraps around the house,
Oh,
and
nice.
it's ADA compliant, where from the driveway, wheelchairs can get right onto the L part of my extended deck to get over here. And it was more meant to be there for my mom as her health declined. Little did I know that I would need it, but I would not be able to be outside and enjoying the outdoors early on, especially because I was wheelchair bound. And all I had to do was help having my wheelchair rolled onto the deck, and then there we go. Because where I'm sitting now, there are two French doors behind me, and there is the little entrance that you have to step up to get in. So I couldn't have really had somebody help me roll the wheelchair out through the French doors behind me. But because there's a gate at the end of the L shape, I'm able to go from the driveway onto the deck and then get out here. So it's been a godsend. And again, I would just tell people, don't get stuck, or don't think the way things are today, they might not be the way things are tomorrow. Because the one thing I say is the doctors had told me early on that the probability would be that if I ever do get to walking again, I would be hobbling, and my left arm's still affected. I would be like walking with my left arm, not in a sling, but kind of down like this. And while that is probable, as the neurologist that told me that, has a big medical degree, went to school for decades, and I get that, I don't want to devalue his education. But while what he said was probable, I still believe it's possible that I can get to a better place than he thought I would. But again, you just have to figure out, work towards your new normal, and know that what your old normal was, you might not get back, but that's okay. Like, for instance, with my golf game, I'm trying to get back. I got to go to Top Golf in the area about a year ago, and I swung one handed, and I'm hoping to be able to get my other hand back involved with some therapy I'm doing. But as I'm over 50 now, as we get older, and if you're a golfer out there, you try to hit the golf ball as far as you used to. And obviously, with age, even when you're in normal shape, so to speak, you're going to lose distance just based on the age. But now the new goal for me is, even if I'm just only able to swing with one hand, maybe that's a situation where the old normal, the way I used to do things, is an old chapter. And now the new chapter is, maybe I can only hit a hybrid 2 iron. I used to hit it about 220, but now one handed, maybe I only hit it like 125, 130, but 125 or 130 might be my starting point. But then it's, what I need to do is, with this new chapter, work to build up that distance again, just using one hand. Maybe I just get to 175, for instance. But
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
right, it's not like I don't expect to hit, because I'm older, I don't expect to hit my hybrid 2 club 220 again, even if I wasn't post stroke now. But it's just a matter of a different standard to compare myself to.
You know, I like your recovery because of recognize my catchphrase is catch the wave warriors achieving victories every day. You notice that stuff. Where does that come from? You notice those little things that become better and better as you do them. Where did that come from?
I think it comes from the old saying, don't sweat the small stuff. And I'm an optimist, so I guess I've always thought anything's possible. But I think the little things are things that I've always been goal oriented. Like I used to be involved with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's team and training program where I could help raise money for cancer research at the same time getting myself in better shape. And I did the triathlons that I did as a part of that program. There are times that I always want to motivate, encourage, and help others. And if I was running across another competitor on the race part, I would try to encourage them if they're falling behind, say, hey, let's jog together to this next tree or the tree after. And again, I try to break my life down and goals and competitions down into smaller size bites. And I guess I've always been positive, and my dad said he was positive earlier in life, but I guess I stole it from him because he's kind of a pessimist nowadays. But I love my
You
dad,
know,
all kidding aside.
yeah, you're always looking for ways to improve. And I, it took me 3, 4 years before I realized I'm the captain of my own team. You actually got out there and became captain of your own team pretty quickly. And I don't know if it was research or referrals or how you did it, but man, you got into Botox, you got into muscle relaxers, you got into AFOs. What are some of the tools that you found and tried and were successful?
Well, the thing that I would say is I got to give a shout out to Baptist Health Hardin Hospital here in E-Town. They've been a great help to me, and they were the first facility I went to the first 6 days after my stroke. And then I went to the local Encompass Rehab Hospital here. And I got to tell you, after the shock set in and my appetite kicked back in, because that's one thing. I usually have a pretty ferocious appetite before my stroke, but stroke took my appetite at first. But then at Encompass, doing 2 to 3 hours of therapy a day, occupational, physical, and swallowing, those kind of things, really did a good, I mean, kicked my butt. But I got to tell you that I was told this, and it's true, that your recovery will only go as far as the work you put into it. And now, granted, after Encompass, I had home health therapy and then I went to outpatient therapy. So I never had that, excuse me, frequency of 3 hours a day after that. And I haven't been as good as doing exercises at home as I should be. But like you mentioned, I've done an AFO, I've done Botox and E-stim, and then here in the near future, right now, I'm on track to get a vagal nerve stimulator to try to help the left side. Because one thing on my positive front, I'm right-handed, and thankfully, or not thankfully, I guess, but fortunately, I should say, my stroke knocked out my left side. Both my leg has been slow to come back, and my arm, I can't unclench my wrist a lot or my fingers, so it's really tough to carry something. Like I can get around with a cane a lot, but if I'm trying to carry a plate for dinner or something, I can't carry my cup with this hand and my plate with the other hand just because it's hard to grasp with the left hand, but it's also hard to release things with my left hand right now. But I'm hoping the different therapies I've done will help.
That's the Vivistem, right? That you're gonna try?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I have a friend up here that had that done up in well, it's not done in my local, but an area
Well, and
hospital.
one thing about everything I've done, it's all about our recovery. Think of it as a tool belt. There are different things we have in our tool belt, hammer, saw, pencil, whatever, that goes into our building project of recovery to trying to build our life back to a acceptable living way. I mean, I might not, I'm not naive saying that, well, yes, I hope to get my left hand back and my left leg. There's a chance that it won't happen. And that's just something I tell people. I will put the work in, I give it all to God, and whatever his plan is, so go I.
I talked to so many survivors that, including myself, it took me 7 years, but in 7 years, I was off my cane and walker and
Wow.
walking. 4 or 5 years later, after several months of acupuncture, here's my left side. My arm works. The
That's awesome.
spasticity was gone. So, I mean, it's like you said, we've got to be aware that there's more than just physical and occupational and speech. There's acupuncture, there's um, certain uh, durable medical equipment, certain procedures that can be
Well,
done.
one thing, sorry to interrupt, but one thing I would add too is behavioral health is so important because I'm seeing a behavioral health specialist who recommended I go get counseling. And some people think, why should I go to counseling? But again, a stroke took us all down to a certain level, and we don't always either realize it or want to admit it. So it's good to talk to somebody that can hear things from you, and it's a third party, if you will. Because actually, Dwayne is a counselor I've gotten who's really been helpful for me here in the area. And as it turns out, he's a little older than me, but he's also a stroke survivor. So not only can he help me talk through things clinically that his books or his training or his teaching might tell him about stroke and helping people with that, but he also understands and kind of do a first person perspective because he's had a stroke.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. Yeah,
And
the
something
mental
else
health counseling.
right, counseling, but also my dad's a pharmacist. He's retired now, but I've never been one to shy away from prescription drugs to help with the problem. So obviously, I mean, this is not the clinical medical term, but our brains got fried to some extent, and there are drugs and therapies that you can do that can help. Maybe they don't help the way that you had hoped, but it gives you a better outlook and a better possibility than possibly not doing it. But that's a question for you to talk with your psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, primary care doctor, because everybody's situation is different.
Exactly, exactly. Excuse me. Um, One of the things I admire is you credit your family as a major part of your recovery. How has stroke affected your entire family, not just you?
Well, my dad's not much of a crier. It's affected all my family in different ways, but my dad, when he found out I had a stroke, became emotional. And like I said, we live about 45 minutes from Louisville, where he lives. And I'm in my 50s. He's older than that. And he has always been close. We've been close, but I've got two sisters and their families that are in Louisville as well, and they spend a lot of time together. But he wanted to come to E-Town and visit me, not just visit me, but he's helped take me to my doctor's appointments and therapy appointments. So there's that perspective of don't take a family member for granted because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But also on the caregiver front, my wife has been a stalwart supporter, and my stepson also has been there, the caregiver, and been there to do like cook around the house and whatnot. And I got to tell you, on the caregiver front that I mentioned earlier, I don't know what your situation was like, Ralph, but when I had my stroke, and when you are a stroke patient, we're just so worried about doing what the doctors tell us. Go get this scan, take this medicine, do these exercises in house or at rehab. But our loved ones are left. In this case, my wife had a lot of phone calls and texts that she was having to field, and everybody meant really well. but she was already overwhelmed because, like you said, there's no really cliff notes for dummies for stroke survivors or caregivers because you have to learn, like, okay, so this hospital has a case manager. What can they do? There's government assistance. How do we plug into that? Insurance issues and even disability issues. Because, like I said, I was working at the time and I had to take time off work, was never able to get back to work, hoping to do something in the near future. I'm on disability currently.
Yeah, well,
But
we have
again, I
no,
mean, sorry,
go ahead.
the one thing I would say is until I went back to work, I wasn't going to get paid. So we were a two income household and then went to one. It's kind of like things that, guys and husbands are supposed to be the providers, take care of the yard and things around the house. But when one of you goes down, the other one has to pick up the ball. And that's not always easy. It can be stressful.
Yeah, can be. And it can affect the marriage if you don't pay attention.
Very
Um,
true.
I have a curious question. What do you wish survivors better understood about caregivers and caregivers better understood about survivors?
It's not a curious question. It's a good one because what I would say, it's been my experience that stroke survivors, like in my situation, I should understand that my wife is my caregiver, wants what's best for me. Like, there are times as a stroke survivor who want to push the envelope. And my wife's biggest fear is that I fall again because I wasn't the most steady person early on in my recovery. So, what I would say in a nutshell, stroke survivors should understand about caregivers. They do want what's best for you, and you might butt heads sometimes, but at the same time, don't forget they love you and they're just trying to watch out for you. And what I would say, in my opinion, from a stroke survivor to a caregiver, and actually this goes both ways, just try to have patience with each other and grace. And there are going to be times when things might get ugly from the standpoint of they're trying to run the household that you can't run in your current condition, and you're just trying to get better. But you also, as a stroke survivor, I've tried to not only love my wife with grace and patience, but also understand the stress they're under is not stress that we're under as stroke survivors. We might not realize it. Now that I'm 2 years past, like there are things that I'm trying to do as I'm home more. I still can't fold a fitted sheet for the life of me. I don't know who can because
No.
I don't have my left hand. Like putting shirts on hangers can be a little tricky, uh, buttoning the buttons and whatnot. But at the same time, things that I can do, like try to load or unload the dishwasher, that's a big thing for my wife. And that might be a big thing for your caregiver too. Try to do things the best you can, but realize that, like before the stroke, you might have been lickety split in doing it. Give yourself plenty of time to do it, but they will appreciate any support you can safely give.
I see in successful care and survivor relationships, one of the things is don't, um, I've been told by so many of the care partners and survivors, don't assume anything. Don't assume that I want you to do everything for me as a survivor. And the caregiver and the survivor has to realize don't assume they know what you need or want to do everything for you. I mean, there's a communication component there that is incredibly important and maybe a mental health thing for her care partner as well.
There is a one saying that I come up with is whenever trying to do things. I had a shirt my daughter made for me. I said, "I had a stroke. What's your excuse?"
Yeah, I
as
like it.
far as that's the one thing because stroke survivors, our memories are impacted, and that's the grace part that our caregiver needs to give us. But also, I would tell people kind of back to the family member part. If you know a family member, friend, or neighbor, or church member, maybe church friend, who had a stroke, and either you haven't seen them much lately or talked to them, check on them because even though we might seem okay on the outside, we might not be okay. And that's just
Yeah.
important because a lot of times, at least my experience has been, we can be cut off from human interaction, which is something we all need. And that's why I appreciate my wife encouraging me. I'll grab coffee with a brother several times a week. I go to church 2 or 3 times a week. And Gus, it's okay. Sorry. Got some
So,
dogs causing ruckus in the backyard. But
oh, no problem. I don't hear them.
good.
So,
But the other thing
anyway,
I would say about the stroke survivor, don't just sit at home. And like I said, I do have coffee with brothers and friends and go to church. But volunteering is something that any stroke survivor can do. It's a great way to get out of the house. I volunteer as a peer support volunteer at a local hospital. And what that basically means is I'll get called when there's a new stroke patient who might need to be encouraged or motivated or prayed over. I also serve on the board of the local chapter of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And I
mm,
also am co leading a Bible study, a men's study at church right now, The Case for Christ. And I'm just saying all that to say you don't have to be as involved as I've been. I just don't like to sit on the sidelines, whether it be in life or with my stroke survivorship. I just want to be intentional with the time I have and not just sit on my duff all day. And there's only so many reruns of Rockford Files I can watch.
and besides that, I think a lot of people don't realize, and it took me a long time to realize it. Those things help you recover. I mean, you'll learn something from other stroke survivors. You learn something from your Bible studies. You get, a spiritual guidance that helps you get through the difficult times of recovery. So,
I would agree with that. And one thing I would add is, as I've been on this journey of this new ministry and motivation that God's taught me about, what happens if I don't wake up tomorrow? How will or how should I live today? We all should embrace the suffering we're dealt with. I mean, I know we're talking about stroke survivorship, but maybe you're a widower, maybe you're childless, maybe you're a divorcee. But again, embrace your suffering, but don't let it define who you are. I mean, yes, use it to help others, but like for a while, my wife Kim said, how many times are you going to tell people you're a stroke survivor? Like for a long time, I would bring up prayers for my stroke survivorship and updates. And not that that's not important, but that's not who I am. Yes, it's my suffering, but more importantly, I embrace the fact I'm a stroke survivor. Praise the Lord, I'm here today. But also, I want to motivate and encourage others, not just about health issues. Maybe it's about work issues. Maybe it's about church issues, building a community. And, we're stronger together. And I really believe that.
I agree. I agree. We're kind of running out of time here, so I want to finish up with a couple questions and ask you if we could do a part two maybe tomorrow.
Sure.
Okay, good. And we'll talk about part two after this. Um, Talking about family, I want to finish today anyway. Um, One of the most important goals you've been have said is walking your daughter down the aisle. Tell me about
Mhm.
that.
So, coming up in September, my youngest daughter is getting married to a gentleman that I gave my blessing. And at first, I was really trying to do the being goal oriented. I was thinking, well, hey, I wonder if I could walk her down the aisle without my cane. Now, granted, I'm getting better in therapy and doing that. But my wife had said to me, now you're going to be in trouble with me young man, if you trip while you're walking down the aisle and get that pretty girl's white dress dirty. So you better keep that in mind. And I will tell you, I know one of the things that I struggle with as a man is I can be prideful and arrogant and defensive. So I continue to believe, oh yeah, that's okay. We'll just have them play here. Here comes the bride 2 or 3 times, and we'll be fine.
Yeah, there
But
you go.
the more I thought about it, it's her day, it's not mine. And one reason I wanted to do it without the cane was to give God the glory, because without him, I wouldn't be here today. But truthfully, it goes back to a neighbor of mine said this a few months ago. Whether I use a cane or not, the fact that I can walk her down the aisle is the most important part. So knowing that it's her day and a cane I can walk more quickly than without a cane.
Yeah.
And I just want to give glory to God and give the newlyweds their day in the sun.
Well, I pray for you that you can accomplish that. Um, like I said, we'll do it to part two, but thank you for joining us today and sharing your reality of recovery, the victories, the struggles, and importance of continuing to move onward and upward. To everyone listening, your story matters, your recovery is worth fighting for, and you are never alone on this path. We'll
And
definitely
don't give
talk.
up. I would like to add, don't give up.
Yeah. And you have some social media links that you support people, is that correct?
I do. LinkedIn is the best place for people to find me if they like to reach out to me. Just search Chad Queen Comms Leader, and that should find me. That's the
Okay,
easiest way.
awesome. And you're open to talk to any survivors.
I am. I've got time on my hand now that I don't have an 8 to 5 job right now.
Okay. And you're doing, we don't have that much time. You got to exercise for walking down that
That's right.
aisle. Share this conversation with someone who needs to hear it. And I challenge you to bring two people in to joining in this message, spreading the message of recovery, hope, and possibility. Catch the wave. You are warriors achieving victories every day. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you, Ralph.